Chapter 1. The Offering in the Ruins. The iron gate shrieked as Alara pushed through, her boots crunching frost-brittle leaves in the abandoned monastery courtyard. 3 days without sleep had turned the world into a watercolor. Bleeding edges, uncertain shadows. Behind her, the village bells tolled midnight, each chime a reminder that her stepfather's men were closing the distance. She pressed deeper into the ruins, Gothic arches looming like skeletal fingers against the November moon. Her leather satchel, stuffed with stolen medical texts and her mother's journal, banged against her ribs. The journal's final entry burned in her memory. "Your blood is both gift and curse, my daughter. Hide what you are. Too late for hiding now." The sanctuary's roof had collapsed decades ago, leaving pews exposed to starlight. Alara's breath misted as she stumbled toward the altar, where stone saints stared with pitiless eyes. Her heel caught on rubble. She pitched forward, palms scraping granite, and felt the familiar warm trickle, blood welling from a braided skin. "You shouldn't be here." The voice emerged from the shadows behind the altar, male, low, with the careful enunciation of someone forcing control. Alara spun, heart hammering, and found him watching from the archway of what had been the priest's vestry. Tall, impossibly still, eyes that caught the moonlight like a wolf's. "I'm sorry," she managed, rising on shaking legs. "I didn't know anyone." Her words died as he stepped into the light. Beautiful. That was her first thought, immediately followed by wrong. His features were aristocratic, sharp cheekbones, sensual mouth, dark hair touching his collar, but his pallor went beyond winter's touch. His skin held the translucence of fine porcelain, blue veins visible at his temples. He wore a coat that had been expensive once, now frayed at the cuffs, and he moved with predatory grace. "You're bleeding." Not a question. His gaze fixed on her scraped palms with an intensity that made her stomach clench. Alara instinctively hid her hands behind her back. "It's nothing." "It's everything." His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping. "Leave. Now." She should run. Every instinct screamed it. But she'd spent 3 days running from her stepfather's plans to sell her to the anatomists, who'd heard rumors of her unusual constitution. This stranger, for all his strangeness, hadn't grabbed her yet. "There are men hunting me," she said quietly. "If I go back out there, better them than me." He turned away sharply, gripping the archway's edge. His shoulders were rigid beneath the coat. "I can hear your pulse. I can smell." He stopped, and when he spoke again, his voice had dropped to something barely human. "Girl, I am not safe." The word hung between them. Smell, not see, not sense. "You're a vampire," Alara breathed. His laugh was bitter. "Perceptive. Now run, before I stop being civilized about it." She didn't run. Her mother's journal had mentioned them, the undying houses, their codes and hierarchies. And she'd read enough anatomy texts to recognize starvation when she saw it. The hollows beneath his cheekbones, the way he held himself with rigid control, the slight tremor in his hands. "When did you last feed?" The question escaped before she could stop it. He went utterly still. "That's not your concern." "You're shaking. Leave." Outside, voices echoed through the ruins. Her stepfather's hunting party, their torches visible through the broken walls. She heard dogs barking, getting closer. The vampire heard them too. His head snapped toward the sound. "They'll find me," Alara whispered. "Please." Something shifted in his expression. Calculation replacing the desperate hunger. "If I shelter you, they'll smell you on me. They'll come back with priests and fire. I can pay you." His eyes, she realized, were gray. Storm gray. "I don't want your coin." "Not coin." She stepped closer, pulse jumping in her throat. His nostrils flared. She watched him track the rhythm of her heartbeat like a musician following a score. I heal. Fast. Faster than normal people. She held up her palms. The scrapes, from moments ago, had already stopped bleeding. The skin knitting pink. My blood regenerates. The vampire stared at her hands, then her face, with an expression caught between horror and desperate longing. You don't know what you're offering, he said hoarsely. I'm offering to survive. The voices were closer now, boots on stone. We both are. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he exhaled slowly, extended one pale hand. Victor Thorn, Alpha of the Thorn House, and you've just made a very dangerous bargain, little healer. His fingers closed around hers, cold as January, strong enough to shatter bone, and pulled her into the vestry's deeper shadows as the first torch beam swept across the sanctuary. Chapter 2. The Manor of Thorns. The passage behind the vestry descended into earth-scented darkness, lit only by Victor's preternatural vision as he guided Alara through tunnels that smelled of damp stone and centuries. His hand remained around her wrist, not bruising, but inescapable. She focused on the steady pressure of his fingers, the coldness of them, anything but the enclosed darkness pressing against her shoulders. These catacombs connect to my estate, he said quietly. A mile northeast. Your hunters won't follow. How do you know? Because these tunnels are known and feared. His tone carried grim satisfaction. No villager crosses Thorn land after dark. They emerged into a cellar lined with wine racks, dust thick enough to track their footprints. Victor released her wrist, struck flint to a candelabra, and golden light bloomed across vaulted ceilings. Alara glimpsed rows of bottles, labels yellowed, some bearing dates from the last century. He noticed her stare. I stopped drinking wine around the same time I stopped eating food. The collection is decorative now. The admission's casual despair unsettled her. She followed him up stone stairs into a manor that breathed decay and faded grandeur. Moonlight through grimy windows illuminated sheet-covered furniture. Portraits, with watching eyes, a chandelier missing half its crystals. Everything was expensive, untouched, slowly succumbing to time. When did you last have servants? Alara asked, trailing him through corridors lined with ancestral paintings. 20 years, perhaps 30. Victor moved through the darkness without hesitation, navigating by memory. I dismissed them when the hunger became difficult to manage around human heartbeats. She filed that away. He'd been starving himself for decades. Why? He stopped before a door, hand on the tarnish-blackened handle. Because feeding requires consent, and consent requires trust, and I am Alpha of a house at war. I cannot afford vulnerability. He pushed open the door. You'll sleep here. Don't leave this room after dark. The guest chamber held a 4-poster bed with moth-eaten hangings, a wardrobe smelling of lavender and age, a window overlooking dead gardens. Moonlight turned everything silver and sad. War with whom? Alara set her satchel on a velvet chair, watching Victor's reflection in the darkened window. He stood in the doorway, carefully not entering, observing some old-world propriety even in extremity. House Corvus, they want. He paused, seeming to choose words carefully. They want to break the treaties, expand their hunting grounds beyond the consented. If they knew you were here, offering what you've offered. His expression hardened. You'd become a prize worth killing for. A walking blood supply. Alara said flatly. Yes. She turned to face him fully. In the candlelight, his beauty was more apparent and more terrible. Marble perfect features, eyes that held centuries of watching. And beneath it all, the terrible hunger. She could see it in how his gaze kept dropping to her throat, then jerking away with visible effort. You haven't fed from me yet, she observed. I won't. Tonight, Victor's hands fisted at his sides. You're exhausted, frightened. Consent given under duress is no consent at all. Something warm unfurled in Alara's chest despite the cold room. You're very honorable for a monster. Don't romanticize me, girl. I'm considering it. His voice dropped to gravel. I'm standing here calculating exactly how much I could take before you'd be too weak to protest. That's not honor. That's a leash I've woven from 200 years of discipline, and it's fraying. The raw honesty shocked her. She swallowed hard. My name is Alara. Alara Voss, not girl. Alara. He tested the name, and something in his expression softened fractionally. Sleep. Lock the door. In the morning, I'll explain what you've entangled yourself with. He began to withdraw. Victor. He paused. Thank you for not taking. His laugh was low, dark. Thank me when dawn comes and you're still breathing. Then he was gone, the door clicking shut, leaving her alone with the dust and moonlight and the racing of her own traitorous heart. Alara locked the door, then leaned against it, listening. She heard nothing, no footsteps, no breath. The manor settled around her like a living thing, wood creaking, drafts sighing through gaps in the windows. She unpacked her mother's journal, running fingers over the leather cover. Your blood is both gift and curse. She'd offered it to a starving vampire, a starving alpha vampire, which sounded important. And in doing so, she'd apparently painted a target on herself for an entire rival house. But Victor hadn't taken her. Hadn't forced. Despite hunger that made his hands shake and his voice fracture, he'd walked away. Alara moved to the window, looking down at the dead gardens, winter bare rose bushes, a fountain choked with leaves, statuary green with moss, everything beautiful, everything dying, like the man, creature, who lived here alone, starving himself rather than break his principles. She pressed her palm to the cold glass. Somewhere in this decaying manor, Victor Thorne was fighting himself, fighting the monster he claimed to be. And she'd just promised him the one thing that could save or damn them both. Outside, an owl shrieked. The sound echoed through the empty gardens, through the hollow rooms, and Alara wondered if Victor was listening to it too, listening to anything other than the steady, treacherous drum of her pulse. Chapter 3. Blood and revelation dawn came pale and cold through the grimy window. Alara woke to frost patterns on glass and the disorienting silence of a house without heartbeats. She dressed in yesterday's clothes, wool traveling dress, practical boots, and ventured cautiously into the corridor. The manor looked worse by daylight. Water stains bloomed across ceilings, wallpaper curled away from walls like peeling skin. She followed the main staircase down to a foyer dominated by a portrait of a dark-haired man in 18th century finery, his gray eyes arresting even in oil paint. My father. Victor's voice came from a doorway to her left. He had himself painted the year before I was born. 1785, Alara turned. Victor stood in what had been a drawing room, dressed in different clothes, still dark, still expensive beneath the wear, and looking marginally less corpse-like. Not healthy, but less like he'd collapse at any moment. You look better, she said carefully. I fed last night. Rats from the cellar. His mouth twisted with distaste. It takes the edge off. Barely. He gestured to a tea service set on a dust cloth-covered table. I remember how to make tea, though I can't taste it anymore. Bread from the village baker. I send coin down monthly. The food is for you. The consideration in the gesture surprised her. Alara sat, poured tea with hands steadier than she'd expected, and bit into bread that was fresh, still warm. Victor settled into a chair across from her, moving with that unnatural grace. He didn't eat, didn't drink, just watched her with those storm-gray eyes. Tell me, Alara said between bites, how this works. Your world, you want vampire history over breakfast? I want to understand what I've walked into. Victor nodded slowly. Fair enough. He steepled his fingers. Pianist's hands, she noticed, long and elegant. There are 7 houses in this region, each led by an alpha. We follow the old treaties. Feed only from willing donors, kill no humans, maintain the secrecy of our existence. In exchange, the church tolerates us, mostly. House Corvus breaks these treaties. Cassius Corvus wants to return to the old ways, hunting freely, taking without asking. He's been converting younger vampires to his ideology, building a faction. Victor's expression hardened. 3 months ago, his people attacked a village. Made it look like animal attacks. 12 dead. Alara set down her cup, stomach churning. Why haven't the other houses stopped him? We need proof he ordered it. Vampire law requires evidence before we can move against an alpha. I've been investigating, gathering testimony from his house members who still honor the treaties. He stopped abruptly, head cocking. We have visitors. Alara heard nothing. Then distantly, the sound of horses. Many horses. Victor was at the window instantly, body tensed. Damn, Corvus's riders, 6 of them. He turned to her, and for the first time she saw fear in his eyes. They shouldn't know you're here. Unless, his jaw clenched, someone from the village sold information. What do they want? You. Your regenerative blood. He crossed to her in 3 strides, gripped her shoulders. His hands were still cold but steady now. Listen carefully. Vampires can sense bloodlines. Talent runs in families. If you can heal this fast, your blood carries something ancient, something that could sustain a vampire indefinitely without repeated feeding. Horror dawned. You mean, they'd keep you as cattle, Alara. Drain you repeatedly, let you heal, drain you again, forever. His fingers tightened fractionally. I won't let that happen. Hoofbeats stopped outside. Voices, cruel laughter, the jangle of tack. Then a knock, sharp and mocking, on the manor's front door. Thorn. We know she's here. The healer girl. Send her out and we'll leave peacefully. Victor's eyes bled to crimson, the first inhuman thing she'd seen beyond his pallor. Go to the cellar. The tunnel you entered through. Run. What about you? I'll hold them off. 6 against 1. I'm Alpha. That means something. He was already moving her toward the drawing room's servant entrance. Go now. But Alara had read enough of her mother's journal to know. You're weakened. You've been starving for years. You can't... The front door exploded inward. Wood splintered. Alara glimpsed figures moving with inhuman speed. Pale blurs, red eyes, fangs bared. Victor shoved her behind him, and she felt his body coil with predatory tension. Cassius sent his regards, the lead vampire said, stepping over the ruined door. He was young-looking, blonde, with a scholar's face and a killer's smile. Said we could keep the girl if we brought him proof of your death. The treaties, Victor began, are antiquated. The blonde vampire gestured, and his companions spread out, encircling. The strong feed, the weak starve. You chose starvation, Thorn. Poor strategy. They attacked simultaneously. Victor moved like lightning, catching one vampire by the throat and hurling him through a window. Glass shattered, but another was on him, then 2 more bearing him down. Alara heard his snarl of pain, smelled blood, old blood, vampire blood, dark as wine. One of the attackers turned toward her. Female, red-haired, beautiful and terrible. Come here, little meal. Alara backed toward the fireplace, hand closing around the iron poker. Stay away. The vampire laughed and lunged. Alara swung. The poker connected with the vampire's temple, iron against flesh, and the creature shrieked and recoiled. Iron. She remembered suddenly. Her mother's journal mentioned iron, its resonance against undead flesh. The girl has teeth, the blonde vampire said with dark amusement. He had Victor pinned now, 2 others holding the Alpha's arms. This will be entertaining. Victor's eyes met hers across the chaos, gray bleeding to crimson, desperate and furious. Run, he mouthed. But Alara Voss had spent her life running. She gripped the poker tighter and stood her ground. Chapter 4. The Blood Bargain. The red-haired vampire circled Alara like a cat toying with prey, keeping just beyond the poker's range. Behind her, Alara heard Victor struggling, snarls, the meaty impact of fists on flesh, but she didn't dare look away. "Iron hurts," the vampire cooed, "but it doesn't kill. And you're just a human, fragile little thing," she feinted. Alara swung, but the vampire was already moving, faster than sight. Cold fingers locked around Alara's wrist, wrenching the poker away. It clattered across the floor. The vampire's other hand fisted in Alara's hair, yanking her head back to expose her throat. "Let's see what makes you special," the vampire purred, fangs descending. "Alara!" Victor's roar shook the walls. Power exploded outward, alpha dominance, raw and ancient. The vampires holding him staggered. Victor broke free, crossing the room in a blur, and tore the red-haired vampire away with such force that they both crashed through the drawing room wall into the foyer. The blonde vampire cursed. "Subdue him! Don't let him!" But Victor was already in motion, fueled by desperation and fury. He moved through Cassius's people like a storm, breaking bones, tearing flesh. 2 vampires went down. A third retreated screaming, but there were still too many, and Victor was weakening. Alara saw it in the slowing of his movements, the way he staggered after the last strike. The blonde vampire tackled him from behind. They went down together, rolling across broken glass. Victor ended underneath, the blonde's hand around his throat. "You should have fed, Thorn," the blonde hissed. "Should have been strong." He raised his other hand, clawed, gleaming, poised to strike at Victor's heart. Alara didn't think. She grabbed a shard of broken window glass, ran forward, and drove it into the blonde vampire's back. He shrieked and rolled away. The glass was ordinary, not iron. It wouldn't kill him. But it bought Victor seconds. He surged upward, caught the blonde by the jaw, and twisted. The crack echoed through the ruined foyer. The blonde vampire collapsed, neck bent at an impossible angle. Not dead. Vampires didn't die easily, but incapacitated. The remaining attackers retreated, dragging their wounded. The red-haired vampire spat blood and pointed at Alara. "Cassius will hear about her. He'll come himself. And you won't survive that, Thorn." Then they were gone, out the shattered door, into the winter morning moving faster than horses. Silence crashed down. Alara stood frozen, still holding the bloody glass shard, her hand shaking. Victor remained on his knees amid the debris, breathing heavily. Unnecessary breathing, she realized dimly. A habit from life. "Victor?" Her voice came out small. He looked up and she saw the damage. Claw marks across his chest, black vampire blood soaking his shirt. His face was gray again, corpse pale. The brief strength from the rat blood burned away. "Are you hurt?" he asked roughly. The question was so absurd, he was clearly wounded, that Alara laughed, high and slightly hysterical. "You're asking if I'm hurt? Answer me, I'm fine. You're not." She dropped the glass, crossed to him carefully. Up close, the wounds looked worse, deep gouges that wept sluggish blood. "You need to feed, now. I'll heal, slowly." Victor tried to stand, faltered. Alara caught his arm, cold, solid muscle beneath the torn fabric, and helped him up. He was heavy, radiating a chill that seeped into her bones. How slowly? Days? Maybe weeks, given my state? He let her guide him toward the drawing room's intact furniture, collapsing onto a settee. "I've survived worse." "While Cassius comes here himself?" Alara knelt beside him, studying the wounds. Her medical training kicked in despite the strangeness of treating a vampire. The gouges went deep, exposing muscle. On a human, these would be fatal without immediate surgery. "You can't fight him like this. You said it yourself. You're weakened. I'll send word to the other alphas. Call for a conclave. That takes time you don't have." Alara pulled off her shawl, began tearing it into strips. "Let me help you. You are. You distracted them. That glass shard..." Something almost like a smile touched his mouth. "You're braver than I credited. Or stupider." She pressed a strip of fabric to the worst wound on his chest. His shirt was ruined anyway. She pushed it aside without thinking, exposing pale, perfect skin marred by violence. "Victor, feed from me. Heal. Then we can plan." His hand caught hers, stopping the bandaging. "Alara, if I feed now, in this state, This hungry, I might not be able to stop. She met his eyes. Gray again now, the crimson faded but haunted. You stopped last night. Last night I wasn't injured. Wasn't desperate. His thumb brushed her wrist, right over the pulse. Vampire feeding is intense. It creates a bond. Blood shared is trust exchanged, and I have lived 2 centuries guarding my trust carefully. I'm offering, Alara said quietly. Freely, no duress. You saved my life just now. You saved mine first, with that poker. The corner of his mouth lifted fractionally. We're even. Then let's be unevenly matched toward trust. She shifted, presenting her wrist. My blood regenerates, remember? I'll grow it back. The echo of her own words to him, that innocent offer in the ruins, hung between them. Victor stared at her wrist, and she watched the war in his expression. Hunger. Honor. Desperate need colliding with 2 centuries of iron control. Finally, carefully, he took her hand, raised her wrist to his mouth. His lips brushed her skin, cold, soft, and she felt the scrape of fangs. Tell me to stop, he whispered against her pulse. If it becomes too much. Then he bit down, and Alara's world dissolved into fire and ice. Chapter 5. The taste of trust, the first sensation was cold. His mouth against her wrist, the chill of him spreading up her arm. Then came the pressure, sharp and precise, fangs piercing skin. Alara gasped, tensed, expecting pain. Instead, warmth flooded through her. Not heat exactly, more like the rush of whiskey on an empty stomach, a golden unfurling that made her lightheaded. Victor's lips sealed against her skin, and she felt the pull of blood leaving her body in rhythmic draws. He'd moved them somehow. She was sitting now, cradled against him on the settee, his arm supporting her back. His free hand cupped her elbow gently, holding her wrist steady. Everything about his touch was careful, deliberate, even as he drank. Alara watched, fascinated and dizzy. His throat moved with each swallow. The wounds on his chest were already knitting closed, flesh pulling together, black blood ceasing its sluggish flow. Color returned to his face, not a living flush, but something less corpse-like. The tremor in his hand stilled. She was healing him. Actually, tangibly healing him with nothing but her blood and strange biology. The pull continued. Her heartbeat seemed louder, echoing in her ears. Or maybe she was feeling it through him, their pulses synchronizing. The golden warmth spread deeper, pooling low in her belly, making her breath come faster. This was intimate in a way she hadn't anticipated. Vulnerable, like letting someone inside her skin. Tell me to stop if it becomes too much. It wasn't too much. Not yet. But she was beginning to feel it. The lightness in her head, the weakness in her limbs. Her medical training supplied numbers, blood volume, safe donation limits, shock symptoms. Victor, she whispered. He stopped immediately. His fangs withdrew with a sensation that made her shiver. Not pain, but the absence of that strange connection. He held her wrist a moment longer, his tongue brushing the punctures, and she watched in amazement as her skin sealed beneath the touch. Some property of his saliva, perhaps. A moment later, only 2 faint pink marks remained. Victor released her carefully, settling her against the cushions. His eyes were pure gray now, clear and focused. The wounds on his chest had closed completely, leaving only dried blood on his skin. How do you feel? His voice was rougher than usual, deeper, dizzy. But all right. Alara examined her wrist, turning it in the light. Already the pink marks were fading, her regeneration working. You? Stronger. He stood, testing his weight, and moved with the fluid grace she'd seen before. No hesitation, no weakness. Your blood is extraordinary, Alara. I've never felt anything like it. The potency? He stopped, seeming to choose words carefully. I took perhaps a pint from an ordinary donor that would sustain me a day, maybe 2. From you? He flexed his hands, staring at them. I feel as though I could fight for a week without flagging. Pride flickered through the dizziness. Good, because Cassius is coming. Victor's expression hardened. Yes, and when he does, he'll bring his full strength. 20 vampires, perhaps more. He began pacing, predatory energy restored. We need allies. I'll send ravens to the other houses. Ashford, Ravencrest, Montclair. If I can convince them that Cassius broke treaty law by attacking my estate, will they come in time? I don't know. He turned to her, and something in his gaze made her breath catch. You should leave. I'll arrange passage to the coast, money for a ship. You could be in the Americas within a month. No. Alara, no. She stood, swaying only slightly, and met his stare. I'm not running anymore. I'm tired of running. And besides, she gestured at her wrist, you need me. My blood gives you strength, strategic advantage. It also makes you a target. I've been a target since I was born with this ability. Alara moved closer, studying his face, really studying it for the first time. In proper light, fed and healed, Victor Thorne was breathtaking. Aristocratic features, yes. But there was character in the lines around his eyes, the set of his mouth. This was a man, creature, who'd lived centuries and carried the weight of them. Tell me about the bond. You said feeding creates one. Victor hesitated. It's difficult to explain to someone who hasn't experienced it. When a vampire feeds from a willing donor repeatedly, a connection forms. Emotional resonance. You begin to sense each other. Moods, proximity, danger. It's how bonded pairs function in houses. Partners who hunt together, fight together. Are we bonded now? The beginning of one, perhaps. It would take more. Repeated feedings, time, proximity, to fully form. He turned away, presenting his back. I should burn these bodies, Cassius's people, before the church comes investigating. The deflection was obvious. Alara let him have it, watching as he gathered the incapacitated blonde vampire, still breathing shallowly, neck healing, and dragged him toward the door. But something had shifted between them in that feeding. She'd felt it, the way his gratitude bled into something more complex. The way her own pulse had raced not entirely from blood loss. Victor, she called. He paused in the doorway. Thank you for stopping when I asked. His shoulders tensed. That's the baseline, Alara. Not something to thank me for. In my experience, baselines are rarer than they should be. She thought of her stepfather, his casual cruelty. The anatomist who'd wanted to study her like a specimen. You could have taken more. You didn't. No, he said quietly, not turning. I didn't. He left then, dragging the body, and Alara sank back onto the settee. Her wrist tingled where he'd bitten her. The golden warmth had faded, but something else remained. A thread of awareness, gossamer thin, connecting her to the vampire-burning bodies in the winter garden, the beginning of a bond. She pressed her fingers to her pulse and wondered what she'd begun. Chapter 6. Shadows and Strategy, the One. Ravens went out at dusk. 6 of them, black wings disappearing into winter twilight, each carrying Victor's urgent summons to the other houses. Alara watched from the library window as Victor returned across the dead gardens, his coat dusted with ash from burning Cassius's people. She'd spent the afternoon exploring the manor's intact rooms, discovering a library that stole her breath, floor-to-ceiling shelves packed with books, medical texts, histories, poetry in languages she didn't recognize. A scholar's collection, carefully maintained despite the decay elsewhere. This is beautiful, she said as Victor entered, bringing cold air with him. My father was a physician before he was turned. Victor moved to the fireplace, began building a fire with practiced efficiency. He spent his immortality collecting knowledge. I inherited the habit. He glanced at the medical text open in her lap. Gray's Anatomy, a pristine first edition. You read medicine? I studied with the village doctor before. She stopped. Before her mother died. Before her stepfather decided she was more valuable sold than free. Before, Victor didn't press. He coaxed flames to life, and warmth bloomed through the library. Alara curled deeper into the leather armchair, watching him work. Firelight softened his features, catching in his dark hair, and for a moment, he looked almost human. The other alphas will respond within 2 days, he said, settling into the chair across from hers. If they come. Ashford definitely will, she owes me a debt. Montclair is neutral, but honorable. Ravencrest? He grimaced. He'll want something in exchange. What can you offer? Territory, resources, information. Victor steepled his fingers, firelight reflecting in his eyes. Politics. Even among vampires, especially among vampires, everything is negotiation. Elara studied him thoughtfully. How did you become alpha? Is it hereditary? Sometimes. In my case, I challenged the previous alpha when he started feeding from unwilling victims. Killed him in formal combat. His voice was matter of fact, but she heard the weight beneath. That was 1847. I've held the position since. You killed to enforce consent laws? I killed to preserve what separates us from monsters. He met her gaze. Power without principle is just predation. The words settled between them, heavy with meaning. Outside, full darkness had fallen. The library felt like a pocket of warmth and safety in a world gone cold and dangerous. Teach me, Elara said suddenly. Victor raised an eyebrow. Teach you what? How to fight. Defend myself. She leaned forward, earnest. That iron poker worked because I surprised them. But I was clumsy, slow. If Cassius's people come again, you think you can learn to fight vampires in 2 days? I think I can learn to not be completely helpless. She met his skepticism with determination. You said it yourself. My blood makes me a target. I should know how to protect it. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, perhaps. All right. Tomorrow, when the sun is high. Vampires are weakest then. Even I'm sluggish in full daylight. You should know how to exploit that. They fell into comfortable silence, fire crackling. Elara returned to her anatomy text, but found herself watching Victor instead. He'd pulled a book from the shelves, poetry she saw, noting the gilt lettering, and read with complete absorption, occasionally turning a page with those elegant fingers. What are you reading? She asked. Keats, Ode to a Nightingale. He glanced up. Do you know it? Some. She remembered her mother reading poetry by lamplight, her voice soft. My heart aches, and a drowsy numbness pains my sense. As though of hemlock I had drunk, Victor continued, or emptied some dull opiate to the drains. He smiled faintly. Apt, perhaps. Immortality is its own opiate. You stop feeling the passage of time after the first century. Is it lonely? The question escaped before she could stop it. Victor's smile faded. Yes, he said quietly. It's unspeakably lonely. Everyone you knew as human dies. Everyone you allow yourself to care for ages while you remain frozen. You learn to keep distance. Guard your heart, because attachment, for a vampire, is grief deferred. Elara thought of the empty manor, the dismissed servants, his decades of self-imposed starvation. Is that why you've been alone so long? Partially. He closed the book. Also because being alpha means others depend on my strength. I can't afford the vulnerability of bonds, blood bonds, emotional bonds. Their leverage an enemy could exploit. But you fed from me. Necessity. His gaze held hers. And you offered. Freely. That's rare. The fire popped, sending up sparks. Elara felt that thread of awareness between them again. The nascent bond, growing stronger with proximity and honesty. She could almost sense his mood now. Guarded but curious. Lonely but fighting it. Victor, she said slowly. When this is over, when Cassius is dealt with, what happens to me? What do you want to happen? I don't know. She touched her wrist, where the bite marks had vanished entirely. I've spent my whole life hiding what I am, running from people who'd use me. But with you... She stopped, searching for words. You could have used me. You haven't. You've protected me, taught me, treated me like a person instead of a resource. Victor stood abruptly, moving to the window. His back was rigid. Don't make me into something I'm not, Elara. I'm still calculating. Still considering angles. But you're also standing by a window, hiding your face because my words affected you, she said gently. He laughed, surprised, genuine. When he turned back, something had softened in his expression. You're observant. And dangerous. Is that a compliment? Yes. He crossed to her chair, extended his hand. Come, I'll show you something. Ilara took his hand, still cold, but familiar now, and let him lead her deeper into the manor's shadows. Chapter 7. The portrait and the promise Victor led her to the manor's east wing, through corridors she hadn't explored. Here the decay was less pronounced. Dust, yes, but the wallpaper intact, the floorboards sound. He stopped before a door carved with roses and thorns, produced an old iron key. My father's study, he said, unlocking it. I haven't let anyone in here in decades. The room beyond was pristine. A massive desk dominated the space, its surface neat. Inkwell, blotter, scattered papers held down by an agate paperweight. Bookshelves lined 3 walls. The fourth held a portrait. A woman. Dark-haired, luminous, painted in the romantic style of the early 1800s. She wore white, her hand resting on a greyhound's head, and her smile held secrets. My mother, Victor said quietly. Catherine Thorne. She was human. My father met her in Paris. He was already a vampire, already old. She knew what he was and loved him anyway. Ilara moved closer to the portrait, studying the delicate features. She's beautiful. She was extraordinary. A scholar in her own right, botany, medicine. My father turned me at her request when I was dying of consumption. I was 23. He stood beside Ilara, looking up at the painting. She lived another 30 years after my turning. We had that time together. Her, my father, me. A strange little family. What happened to her? Old age, peacefully in her sleep. She refused to be turned herself. His voice held old grief, carefully controlled. She said one immortal child was enough to watch over. Ilara heard the unspoken weight. He'd watched his mother age and die while he remained frozen at 23. I'm sorry. It was her choice. I honored it. Victor turned from the portrait. But I learned something from her. She told me near the end that immortality without purpose is just existence. That the point isn't how long you live, but what you do with the time. He faced Ilara fully. She'd have liked you, I think. Your courage, your stubbornness. The compliment warmed her more than the library fire had. You brought me here to show me this. Why? Because you asked what happens after. And I wanted you to understand. He paused, seeming to gather words. My mother chose mortality, but she also chose connection. She chose my father despite the inevitable grief. She chose to have me, knowing she'd outlive neither of us. She chose bravely. You're saying I have a choice? I'm saying you always have a choice. Victor moved to the desk, leaned against it. After this is over, if we survive, you're free to go. I'll give you money, safe passage, whatever you need. Or... His gray eyes held hers. Or you stay. Learn everything my father collected. Use this library, this manor. Let me teach you what I know about medicine, biology. The human body is seen through a vampire's perception. You could be extraordinary, Ilara. You already are, her heart hammered. And the feeding? Only if you consent. Always if you consent. He straightened, closing the distance between them. I won't pretend I don't need it. Your blood is unlike anything I've experienced. It's sustaining in a way that makes me feel human again. But I survived 2 centuries before you. I can survive without. Ilara looked up at him. This ancient creature offering her freedom and choice in the same breath. What if I wanted the bond? The full one? What if I wanted to stay not just for the knowledge, but for... She stopped, courage failing. For? Victor prompted softly. For you. The words escaped in a whisper. You're not what I expected. Monster you called yourself, but I've seen you show more honor than most human men. You're lonely and stubborn, and you hoard books like treasure. And when you fed from me, I felt... She stopped, cheeks heating. You felt what? His hand came up, cupping her face. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. Cold, gentle. Safe, she breathed. Connected. Like I finally found somewhere I belong. Victor's expression cracked. Just for a moment, she saw raw longing beneath the control. Ilara, I'm 200 years old. I've done things that would horrify you. I've killed, manipulated, survived by making hard choices. You've known me 3 days. I've known you 3 days of truth. she countered. I'm not afraid of you, Victor. You should be, but I'm not. She reached up, covered his hand with hers. I'm afraid of Cassius. I'm afraid of being cattle for the rest of my life. I'm afraid of dying without ever really living. But you? I'm not afraid of you. He stared at her, something warring in his expression. Then slowly he leaned down. His forehead touched hers, cold skin against warm, and he exhaled shakily. You're making it very difficult to be noble, he murmured. Maybe I don't want you to be noble. Her pulse raced, and she knew he could hear it, could sense her desire as clearly as she was beginning to sense his careful restraint. Maybe I want you to be real. Real, he repeated. Then he pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. Real is me wanting to kiss you. Real is me fighting every instinct to pull you closer. Real is me terrified that I'll ruin you. This bright, brave thing that walked into my death of a life and offered salvation. Then kiss me, Alara whispered. Be terrified later. For a heartbeat, he hesitated. Then Victor Thorne, Alpha of House Thorne, 200-year-old vampire, closed the distance and kissed her. His lips were cold, careful, questioning. Alara answered by pressing closer, her hands finding his chest, feeling the solidity of him. He made a sound, half groan, half surrender, and deepened the kiss, one hand sliding into her hair while the other spanned her waist. Cold and warmth. Restraint and hunger, past and future meeting in the quiet study, while Catherine Thorne's portrait watched with knowing eyes. Chapter 8. Blood Oath. They broke apart slowly, breath mingling, hers quick and mortal, his unnecessary but shared. Victor's hand still cupped her face, his thumb tracing her jaw with aching gentleness. That was unwise, he said, but his voice held no regret. Probably. Alara's fingers curled in his shirt. Do you regret it? No. He kissed her forehead, soft as snowfall. I regret the timing. I regret that Cassius is coming and I may not survive to... He stopped. But I don't regret this. A sound echoed through the manor, sharp, imperious. The door knocker, its iron clang reverberating. Victor tensed instantly, predatory awareness flooding back. The other alphas, he said, earlier than expected. They descended together to find 4 vampires on the threshold, 3 women and a man, all ancient, all powerful. Alara felt their age like pressure against her skin. These weren't Cassius's rabble. These were the old guard. The lead vampire was statuesque, dark-skinned, with silver-white hair coiled in elaborate braids. She wore modern clothes but carried herself like royalty. Victor, you called conclave. We came. Lady Ashford. Victor bowed. Respect between equals. Thank you. Please enter. They filed in, gazes sweeping the ruined foyer with careful assessment. The other woman was willowy, red-haired, with leaf-green eyes. The third wore masculine attire and had the bearing of a soldier. The man was compact, olive-skinned, with calculating eyes. This is Alara Voss, Victor said, his hand finding the small of her back. Claim and protection both. She's under my protection. Alara, these are the alphas. Lady Margaret Ashford of House Ashford, Lady Seraphina Ravencrest of House Ravencrest, Lord Thomas Montclair of House Montclair, and Lady Jean Ashford of House Ironwood. The healer, Lady Ashford said, studying Alara with unsettling intensity. The one Cassius wants. We heard rumors. She regenerates, the red-haired Seraphina added, nostrils flaring. I can smell it in her blood. Extraordinary. No wonder he's hunting her. She's not livestock, Victor said sharply. She's a guest. An ally. Lord Montclair raised an eyebrow. An ally who feeds you, judging by your restored strength. Interesting. They gathered in the library, Alara acutely aware of being the only mortal in a room of apex predators. Victor kept her close, territorial in a way that made the other vampires exchange knowing glances. Cassius broke treaty law, Victor said without preamble. He attacked my estate with 6 of his people, attempted to abduct Alara by force. I have one of his vampires in the cellar, still living. Testimony. Why would he risk open warfare? Lady Ashford asked. Because he believes the old ways are returning. Because he's building an army of young vampires who've never known human governance, who see the treaties as chains. Victor's jaw tightened. And because he thinks if he captures Alara, he'll have unlimited power. Her blood is potent enough to sustain a vampire indefinitely. Silence. Then Serafina leaned forward. How potent? I took one feeding. I feel as though I've drunk from a dozen donors. Strength, clarity, speed, everything amplified. Victor's hand remained on Alara's shoulder. If Cassius gets her, he becomes unstoppable. He'll break every treaty with impunity. Then we kill him, Lady Jean said flatly. Formal challenge. Trial by combat. He won't accept, Montclair countered. He knows Victor is stronger, even starved. He'll continue guerrilla tactics. Attack, retreat, build his forces until he has overwhelming numbers. So we strike first, Victor said. United, all 5 houses against Cassius and his faction. One coordinated assault on his estate. Lady Ashford shook her head. That's open war. It'll expose us to the humans. The church will get involved. The church is already investigating the village massacre, Victor countered. 12 dead. How long before they connect it to vampires? We have to move now decisively, or lose everything we've built. They argued strategy. Attack points, timing, numbers. Alara listened, absorbing vampire politics. These were generals, not monsters. Calculating, strategic, and deeply afraid of exposure. Finally, Serafina turned to Alara. Girl, you're the fulcrum this balance is on. What do you want? The question surprised her. Victor's hand tightened fractionally on her shoulder. Support, not control. Alara stood, meeting each alpha's gaze in turn. I want to stop running, she said clearly. I want Cassius dead or bound so thoroughly he can never threaten another person like me. And she looked at Victor. I want a life where I choose who gets my blood, who gets my trust, where I'm a person, not a resource. Brave words, Lady Ashford said, something like approval in her voice. Naive words, Montclair countered. Cassius has 40 vampires. We have perhaps 30 between us, and they're scattered across the region. He could attack before we mobilize. Then we need an advantage. Alara's mind raced, pulling from her medical knowledge, her mother's journal, the vampire lore she'd absorbed. Victor said vampires are weakest in daylight. What if we attack at noon? We'd be sluggish, half-blind, Montclair began. But so would Cassius's people. And they're younger, less disciplined. You have centuries of experience fighting in adverse conditions. She looked at Victor. You said it yourself. You could teach me to exploit vampire weakness. Use your own weakness as a weapon. Victor's eyes lit with understanding. A noon assault. Uncomfortable for everyone, but we'd have the advantage of experience and strategy. Cassius has never fought a coordinated daylight battle. It's insane, Serafina said. It's clever, Lady Ashford corrected. She smiled, fangs gleaming. I like this girl. Victor, if you're not keeping her, I'll claim her for House Ashford. I'm keeping her, Victor said, voice leaving no room for argument. The other alphas laughed, genuine, warm. And in that moment, Alara saw what immortality could be. Not lonely darkness, but chosen family. Bonds built on respect and shared purpose. We attack tomorrow at noon, Lady Ashford declared. Prepare your houses. Chapter 9. Battle at noon dawn came cold and brilliant, winter sun burning through frost. Alara stood in the manor's armory, a room Victor had unlocked at midnight, and let Lady Jean help her into light armor. Leather cuirass, iron-studded bracers, a blade at her hip. You'll stay back during the fighting, Victor said for the 3rd time, checking his own weapons. 2 swords, old and perfect. Behind the line, safe. I'll stay smart, Alara corrected. Not necessarily safe. His expression was anguished. If something happens to you. She crossed to him, cupped his cold face. Then you'll survive and remember me. But Victor, I'm not dying today. We're not dying today. She kissed him, fierce and quick. We're winning. The 5 houses assembled in the forest bordering Cassius's estate. 30 vampires, ancient and modern, armed with silver and iron and centuries of skill. They moved through naked trees like ghosts, but Alara saw their discomfort. Midday sun filtered through branches, making them squint, slowing their superhuman grace. "This is madness," Montclair muttered, but he was smiling. "This is advantage," Victor countered. Cassius's manor rose ahead, Gothic and sprawling, surrounded by high walls. Sentries stood watch, but they were young vampires, arrogant in their strength. They didn't expect an attack in daylight. The assault was silent and brutal. Victor led the charge, moving even in sluggish sunlight with deadly precision. The sentries fell. The gates shattered. 30 vampires poured into the courtyard like a tide. Then Cassius's forces responded. 40 vampires emerging from the manor's shadows, fangs bared, eyes crimson. The courtyard became chaos. Steel on steel, snarls and screams, blood, mortal and immortal, staining frost-white ground. Alara stayed behind the line as promised, but kept her eyes sharp. She saw patterns in the chaos. Cassius's people fought like individuals, no coordination. Victor's coalition moved like a machine, Lady Ashford's people guarding flanks, Seraphina's vampires striking fast and retreating, Montclair's holding the center. Then she saw Cassius. He emerged from the manor's main doors. Tall, blonde beautiful as a classical statue and twice as cold. His gaze swept the battlefield and locked on Victor. "Thorn!" His voice carried over the battle. "You brought an army to my door. How ungentlemanly." "You broke the treaties," Victor called back, circling. "You massacred innocents. You attacked my estate," I adapted. "The world is changing, old friend. The treaties are relics," Cassius smiled, fangs gleaming. "And you brought me a gift." His eyes found Alara, the regenerating girl. How considerate. Fear spiked through her, but Alara stood firm. Victor moved to block Cassius's line of sight. Protective. Territorial. "You'll have to go through me," Victor said quietly. "Gladly." Cassius attacked. They moved too fast for human eyes to track. Blurs of motion. The scream of steel, impacts that shook the ground. Victor was stronger fed, but Cassius was fresh and fought dirty. He went for injuries, targeting old wounds, using vampire tricks that made Alara's stomach turn. Around them, the battle turned. Cassius's people were younger, faster in some ways, but the coordinated assault and daylight disadvantage wore them down. Lady Ashford fought like a goddess, efficient, merciless. Seraphina moved like water, everywhere and nowhere. Montclair's swordwork was poetry, but vampires were falling on both sides. Alara saw Lady Jean go down, 3 of Cassius's people on her. Saw Lord Montclair's lieutenant take a blade through the chest, then Victor staggered. Cassius had caught him across the ribs, a deep cut, black blood flowing. Victor's face grayed with pain and sunlight exposure. Cassius pressed the advantage, driving him back toward the manor wall. Alara's heart seized. She saw it, the calculation in Cassius's eyes. He was going to kill Victor. Right now, in front of everyone. She moved without thinking. Grabbed the iron blade at her hip, the one Victor had given her, and ran forward. Not toward Cassius, toward the nearest of his vampires, a young female busy grappling with one of Ashford's people. "Hey," Alara shouted. The vampire turned, surprised. Alara slashed, clumsy but iron-armed. The blade caught the vampire across the face. She shrieked, recoiling. Alara pressed in, driving her back toward where Cassius had Victor pinned. "Cassius!" Alara screamed. "I'm here! Right here! Come take me!" The Alpha's head snapped toward her. Victor roared in fury and fear. And in that heartbeat of distraction, Victor moved, impossibly fast, sunlight be damned. His sword took Cassius through the shoulder, spinning him away from the wall. "Touch her," Victor snarled, "and I'll make your death last decades." The battle's momentum shifted. Cassius's people saw their Alpha wounded, bleeding, saw Victor renewed with fury, saw the 5 houses fighting as one coordinated force. They broke. It wasn't dramatic. No single moment of surrender. But vampires started retreating, disappearing into the forest. Cassius himself backed toward the manor, hand pressed to his bleeding shoulder. "This isn't over, Thorn," he hissed. "It is." Lady Ashford appeared beside Victor, sword leveled at Cassius's throat. "You're outnumbered, outmatched. and witnessed breaking treaty law by dozens of vampires who'll testify before the council. You have two choices, Victor said, cold as January. Submit to council judgment, or I challenge you here and now. Formal combat, to final death. Cassius looked between them. 4 alphas united, 30 vampires loyal to the treaties, his own forces scattered and fleeing. Calculation flickered in his eyes. I submit, he said, the words bitter as poison. I call for council judgment. Bind him, Lady Ashford ordered. They did. Silver chains that burned vampire flesh, making Cassius hiss in pain. As his people were rounded up, tried, judged, Elara stood trembling with adrenaline and fear. Victor appeared beside her, pulled her into his arms, cold and solid and alive. That was the stupidest, bravest thing I've ever seen, he said into her hair. I told you, she whispered back. We're not dying today, Chapter 10. Immortal Choice Spring came to the Thorn estate with startling gentleness. Elara stood in the garden, no longer dead but bursting with new growth, and watched Victor directing the workers. Human workers, hired from the village, who came daily to restore the manor room by room. 3 months since the battle. 3 months since the council had judged Cassius, stripped him of his title, and bound him in silver chains for a century's imprisonment. 3 months of peace. 3 months of choice. The roses are blooming, Victor said, appearing beside her. He could move in full daylight now, fed regularly, consensually from her blood. It had become ritual between them. Evening feedings in the library, his fangs in her wrist, the golden warmth of connection flowing both ways. The bond had grown strong, singing constantly in her awareness. She always knew where he was, could sense his moods like colors in her mind. Your mother planted them, Elara said, touching a blood-red bloom. She did. Hybrid she developed herself. Grows in shade, blooms late. He plucked the rose, offered it to her. She called them eternity roses. Fitting. Elara took the flower, met his eyes. Victor, we should talk. Ominous words. But he was smiling. Real smiles came easily to him now. No longer fighting starvation and loneliness. They walked to the fountain, restored last week, water flowing clear over ancient stone. Elara settled on its edge, and Victor joined her, close enough to touch. I've been thinking, she began, about the future, about what I want, and his hand found hers, twining their fingers together. Warm skin and cold, balanced, I want to stay, here with you. Learning, growing, using what I am for good. I've been helping Lady Ashford with her research into vampire biology. Did you know that? She smiled at his surprised look. She thinks my blood might help develop treatments for the hunger madness. Other medical applications. I didn't know. That's... Pride warmed his voice. That's extraordinary, Elara. I want to keep doing it. I want to fill this library with new knowledge. She paused, gathering courage. I want to be turned. Become vampire. Stay with you not for a human lifetime, but for all the centuries ahead. Victor went very still. Elara, you understand what you'd be giving up? Daylight, eventually. Food, children, family. I'd be gaining a different family. The houses. Purpose, you. She squeezed his hand. I'm not asking because I'm infatuated. I'm asking because I've spent 3 months living this life, seeing what immortality could be. Not lonely darkness. Not predation, but choice and connection, and using forever to make a difference. The turning is painful, he said quietly. 3 days of agony while your body dies and resurrects. And after, you'll need to feed, learn control. It takes decades to master. Then teach me. She turned fully toward him. Victor, I'm not romanticizing this. I know it's hard. I know vampires can be monsters, but I've also seen them be scholars, warriors, friends. I've seen you build something good here. A house that honors consent, that protects the vulnerable. I want to be part of that. As your equal, not your human pet. Something broke in his expression. Hope and fear and desperate love. Equal, he repeated. You'd be my partner. In everything. Running the house, the research, the politics. Yes, Elara. He cupped her face with both hands. I love you. I've loved you since you stood in those ruins and offered your blood with such innocent courage. I've loved you through every feeding, every conversation, every moment of watching you bloom into your power. And I'm terrified that I'm being selfish by wanting this, wanting you forever. You're not asking, she said gently. I'm offering, freely, enthusiastically. Drink my blood, Victor. All of it this time. Let me grow back immortal. He kissed her then, deep and thorough, cold lips and warm breath mingling. When they broke apart, his fangs had descended, and his eyes held crimson flecks in the gray. Tonight, he said, under the moon with the other alphas as witnesses. The turning should be done properly, ceremonially. His thumb brushed her cheek. I want the world to know you chose this. That I didn't steal you into darkness. You walked into it willingly. I walked into it for you, Alara corrected. And for myself. For the life we're building. That night, beneath a spring moon with stars scattered like diamonds, 5 alphas gathered in the restored Thorn Gardens. Alara wore white, her choice, echoing Catherine Thorne's portrait. Victor wore black, his house colors. Alara Voss, Lady Ashford intoned, do you consent freely to the turning? To become vampire, bound by our laws and honored in our houses? I do, Alara said clearly. I consent. Victor drew her close, pressed his forehead to hers. Last chance to run, he whispered. I'm done running. She tilted her head, exposing her throat. Make me immortal. Make me yours. His fangs pierced deep, not the careful feeding of before, but the draining turning. Alara felt her life pouring out, her heartbeat slowing, darkness creeping in. But she wasn't afraid. Victor held her gently, whispering love against her skin, and she trusted him completely. When her heart stopped, he bit his own wrist and pressed it to her lips. Drink. Grow back. His blood tasted of iron and forever. Alara drank deeply, felt it spreading through her dead veins, rewriting her cells, transforming mortality into something infinite. Pain came, searing, total, and she screamed. Victor held her through it. 3 days of agony, 3 days of death and resurrection. On the third dawn, Alara Thorne opened eyes that gleamed crimson gray and looked at her maker, her partner, her choice. Hello, beloved, Victor said, smiling. Welcome to forever. Epilogue. 5 years later, the Thorne estate hosted the annual conclave. All 7 houses gathered for politics and celebration. Alara Thorne, Lady of House Thorne and the council's youngest member, presented her latest research. A serum derived from her regenerative blood that could ease new vampires through their first century of control. Victor watched from the audience, pride and love radiating through their bond. When she finished, the alphas rose in ovation, accepting her fully as one of their own. That night, in their restored library, Victor and Alara stood before Catherine Thorne's portrait. The painted woman seemed to smile approval. Your mother would be proud, Alara said. She'd be proud of us both. Victor pulled her close, kissed her temple. Outside, roses bloomed eternal in the garden. Eternity roses for an eternity of love. Alara pressed her hand to Victor's chest, where his heart beat slow and steady, sustained, by her freely given blood, by their bond, by the choice they'd made together. Drink my blood, she'd said once, innocent and brave. I'll grow it back, she'd promised. And she had, again and again, forever.